Hello, a while ago I decided to make a motor glider and I wanted to try and make it as light as possible. Basically what I was aiming for was a DLG with a motor. So what I've ended up with sort of looks a little bit like a DLG, at least in the tail anyway. And I did it by cutting with hot wire some of this foam. This is the builder's foam. I actually bought this ages ago and never really used it that much. And the way I started cutting it at first was with one of these plywood templates. Just poke some nails into it and use a bow, as it's called. This is my bow here. Unfortunately it's a bit of a crappy one. It's not really up to Andrew Newton standards, so that didn't work out too well, and it was difficult to cut any other way other than by having the flat part of the airfoil on top. So this is like that, and I was using the top part of the foam to be part of the airfoil, if you know what I mean. So I wouldn't actually cut this side of it, I was only cutting the underside. And I did it that way because cutting with the bow was just so darn difficult. But then I tried the other method where you fix one end of the wire to a point in the distance somewhere, and then you just hold one end, and you just need to look at one side of it that way, and it's a lot easier to do. So that's what I ended up doing. The nice thing about that is you can it's easier to cut without being actually on the outside surface. So as you can see there, I've managed to get 3 cuts out of this single section, or well, to be fair I should say 3 attempts out of this section. So that worked quite well actually, and I'll probably be doing it like that in future. And I also changed from using plywood to FR4 for the templates, because the FR4, when you sand the edge down, it's a lot smoother and the wire doesn't tend to stick on it so much. I found that the plywood, as you're trying to slide it along, it just sort of, the wire, instead of moving smoothly, it sort of goes dip, 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 like that. Anyway, I'll show you the video that I recorded earlier while I was doing it. Wow, I can see everything. Still a bit bumpy looking. Obviously still needs some improvements. It's like a corrugated surface here. So after cutting 9 of these wings, mostly just as tests, I've ended up with a couple that I think I can use. I'll just show you the ones that didn't work out. Usually the problem was that the end of the wire that I'm not holding, if you move too fast, because that other end is not really resting against any template or guide or anything, it just sort of seems to waggle and you get these horrible corrugated lines like that. This is probably the worst one, and I thought turning the temperature on the wire up a little bit might help, because instead of waggling as it was trying to push through, it would just cut through, but it didn't make any difference. And it was actually better to turn the temperature down to just hot enough so that it would actually cut the foam, and go really, really slow, and of course pull the wire nice and tight. So these ones, I don't know what I'll do with them, probably nothing, but I'll keep them anyway just in case. And these 2 here I'm going to use. This one was probably close to perfect, but unfortunately this one here is not quite, so I'm just going to have to cut the nice one down to match the size of the one that was not quite perfect. So I've cut both wings to match each other now, and they're a little bit thinner, but they are quite symmetrical, looking fairly good. Very fragile though, I'm finding. I just did a very, very light sanding and managed to nick out that bit rather. So that's going to be where the ailerons go. I'm not sure what I'll do for ailerons. I might try and use these, otherwise I might just use a little piece of balsa. But anyway, because of the way the hot wire was sort of tapered, going towards that single point on the other side of the room, I've ended up with a little bit of wing sweep at the front. This is the front, obviously. So it's a little bit of wing sweep if I just put them together directly like that, which I think I'll do. So that's kind of nice actually. For the wing spar I'm going to use this 6mm wooden dowel. Yeah, I know it's not very good. I do actually have some 6mm carbon rods or tubes that I could use, but I don't really want to use them for this. This is probably going to break pretty quickly anyway, and I don't want to glue them in. So I'm going to cut the channel with the hot wire using this guide line there. You can just see there. It doesn't really have much room. This spar is going to take up about half of the thickness of the wing, and I'm going to do it with my patented method where you put a little loop that sticks out over the side like that, and then you just run the I'm just going to put that over the edge of the table and run the wing down like that to cut it. So that's that done. It's a lot easier doing that with this foam than it is with EPP. It took ages to do that with the Texumo, but anyway, the channel is in there and the dowel fits in there nice and flush, and it actually stiffens it up quite a lot. Like, I don't think there's any need for carbon fibre as far as stiffness goes. It would be nice though if it was a little bit longer, because it only comes out to there, and this last bit of the wing is very soft. Okay, so I've glued the spar in and the wings together now. It's looking quite good. Spar is just nice and flush with the bottom of there. I'm feeling it to be very fragile though. I'm a bit worried that on the first flight out it's just going to break, but I'll just keep with it like this. It weighs exactly 50 grams like this. It's about a 1.2 meter wingspan, by the way, so I think that's a pretty good weight so far. And the servos that I'm going to be using, I'm actually going to put 2 servos on the wing, one for each aileron. They are these Emax ES9251, about 3 grams, somewhere between 3 and 4 grams. So even with 2 of those on there, the wing should still be less than 60 grams. And I'm thinking to put these just ahead of the spar, and so the spar is about there, and it'll go sort of about here, just enough, just far out enough to reach the inside of the aileron, and hopefully it's a little bit short maybe, but we'll see. I used my little hot wire trick again to cut the cavities for these. Originally I was going to cut it with just a craft knife and make it go all the way through, but then I thought, since I've got this hot wire thing, I'll try it, because I knew that these servos were quite narrow. They're only 8mm thick, and I purposely chose this wing to be a little bit thicker than that. So now I have a sort of a paper thin skin on the upper surface of the wing that remains, which is kind of nice. And the servos fit in there just perfectly. There's about a 0.5 mm sticking up, which I think I'll just leave. I'm not going to try and get it any further in. And it actually fits in there quite well without any glue, but I will of course glue it in. And the cable can come down in this little gap beside the spar, which is kind of convenient as well. Here's a bunch of parts that I cut from 0.8mm FR4. It's kind of like PCB board, like fiberglass. It's fairly stiff, fairly light, quite thin. Seemed like the perfect material to be doing this with. So this is actually the second revision of some of these pieces. I made a bit of a mistake, but let me just put one section of it together and show you how it fits. So I have a lot of pieces like this, and they get put together like that, and this is a fairly solid sort of a box shape, and it's going to be taking the carbon fiber boom in the center of it like that, and on the bottom of it it has this sort of feet like that, which are going to be, when they're squashed down, they fit into this sort of arrangement like that, and that makes it so that it's going to line up properly with the other part down there. And this piece here is for holding the wing onto the tail boom, and I'm going to epoxy that on like that, sand it to get it a little bit rougher first of course. And I'll just show you the one that I made yesterday. I already glued this up before I realized that I'd made it too large, so it's just going to glue on together like that. Very solid, pretty light, and because I left the boom in there for the first little part of the drying, it's perfectly aligned, and I can slide the 6mm rod in there almost without catching on the hole as it goes through. It is fairly flexible like that, but once the boom goes in, then it's not flexible, so it's not going to be a problem, I think. But unfortunately I made this to fit the size of the wing as it was in my original design before I had to cut off the back of it a little bit. So I made it a little bit shorter, so this is going to be on the trailing edge exactly. And this piece here, these two holes at the foremost corner, are going to be directly underneath the part of the wing where the curvature on the top of the wing becomes reasonably flat, so that I can screw a screw down into it on the flat part. And it's going to go into that on the top of the wing. So this part's going to be on the bottom of the wing, and this is going to be on the top of the wing. Well, that's that one. And then another one like that on top at the front, and that will hold the wing onto this piece. And I'm aiming to not have to glue this onto the wing, but if it looks like it might become necessary, then I'll just glue it on, and maybe later on if I want to reuse it, I'll have to just try and scrape it down or something. But for now, the plan is, this part of the idea of this design is that it'll be detachable just by undoing these screws, and I can reuse it on something else. So that's the wing attaching to the boom. At the tail end I have something kind of similar, so just repeating another construction of those on here, and then this is going to hold on the horizontal stabilizer, and I'm thinking that the vertical stabilizer will just somehow be attached to the horizontal stabilizer with a sort of a angle, some sort of a 90-degree fixture. Haven't really figured that out yet. So that's for the tail plane. And then for the motor and the ESC and the servo, I'm going to use this servo. It's a little bit heavier than I wanted, but it has a beck in it, which is kind of convenient and means that it'll be less wiring necessary if I used a separate beck. Less wire necessary than if I used a separate beck, I should say. And the servo that I'm going to use is this one here. So this is going to be for the pitch elevator. And I noticed that these are roughly the same size, so when you put them on top of each other, they're kind of like that. So I thought what I'd try and do is have them one on each side of the boom, like this. So that would be the front of the plane. Boom would be going in the middle between them, and then this servo would be going back to the elevator with just a string. So it's going to be a spring with a rubber band, and it's only going to be pulling on the pitch elevator. So to arrange these onto the boom, I made a slightly different setup for this. This layout's the same, so there's going to be one of these on each side of the boom like that, and then a slightly different setup in between them, so it's going to be like this. And maybe I should just put this all together to show you what I mean. Okay, so that's it all together like that. So the boom will go down the center, and then it's going to be glued up with epoxy all over the place, and the sides of it are flat pretty much. These like tabs, they don't protrude out of this side, so there's a nice flat surface to stick the servo on one side and the ESC on the other side. And I've left little gaps down there just in case I want to pass a zip tie around. I'm thinking maybe just double-sided foam tape to hold the servo on, and then a zip tie around it like that, just to make sure it doesn't fall off if the tape happens to get loose. So that's why I've got those little holes there, and those 5mm wide, which should be enough to put 2.5mm zip ties if I should need to. So that's going to be directly behind the motor, I'm thinking. And to mount the motor, I cut 3 pieces like this. So there's 2 pieces like the one on top, and then the last piece has a smaller hole. So here's a couple of those things stuck onto the boom, just to give you a better idea of what I'm thinking about. And they can slide around. I haven't actually thought about how to stop them from sliding, so that's something else that I'm going to have to figure out. So this is the motor, and the motor obviously is going to go onto there, and the holes in here are 2mm, and I'm going to use 2mm M2 screws, but I've drilled these holes, or I've CNC cut these holes to be 1.7mm, so I'm hoping to just self-tap the screw into there and do away with the need for using a screw on the back. Anyway, and the way it's going to mount onto the boom is I realised that these booms being quite thin, I can actually get a 5mm standoff, aluminium standoff in there. Some of these are thinner than others. Let me just get rid of that. And this one is about 4.8mm in diameter, so I can actually get it in there. Although I think I might be starting to split there, so I might have to be careful about that. It looks like it's splitting. Yeah, maybe it is. Anyway, but I can push this in there and I can epoxy that in. Oh yeah, it's splitting. So I'll have to keep this up close there so that it can't actually split any further. But anyway, when that's done, it gives me a 3mm threaded hole in there. Sorry, I can't turn this around anymore because the boom is too long to show you on camera. But then I'm thinking that just a single M3 screw going in through there, like this, would be enough to hold that on. And I'm hoping it's not going to turn around like that too much. I might have to just glue this whole thing on after it's done. I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'm optimistic at this point that it's going to be fairly light and fairly strong. And the reason I'm using 3 pieces here is, of course, that when the screw goes in, the head of the screw is going to need some space because I can't have it bumping up against the bottom of this like that. So yeah, these being 0.8mm thick, that gives me 1.6mm clearance for the head of the screw, which I think will be enough. That's what it's going to look like. Kind of neat. It's like directly in line with the boom. So I'm just gluing the front pieces on at the moment. This is still not fixed, but I think I might just glue it on right now and be done with it while I have this epoxy ready and waiting. So yeah, it's all epoxy. That part's all dry from yesterday. I've just stuck the servo and the ESC on with foam tape for now, but I might also put a zip tie around them. And in here I have committed to fixing the motor mount to the front. And I've got to say, I love the way that epoxy glue, like the surface tension, sort of pulls it to make a nice, neat, curved outer layer like that. So I'm going to use some of this Hobby King covering film to cover the tail pieces, obviously. Just sort of trimming down or shaving a little bit off the trailing edge, and I'll round the leading edge a little bit just to give it a little bit more streamlining, might as well. It's my first time using this covering film, by the way, so I've just been doing some tests on EPO and balsa and this foam board and the actual foam. I was not thinking to do this for the wing to start with, but after I tried it, wow, it really makes it nice and solid. Especially what I was worried about was this trailing edge here, which is very, very thin. But when you put the covering film on it, no problem at all. Like, it's nice and tough. So I think I might just do that. Whether I do that before I do the maiden flight or not, I'm not sure. It might be a good idea to, but we'll see. And I also noticed that when you do that on this, I tried it on this badly corrugated one that I had. This is one of my failures, and it actually is still corrugated, but it's less of a problem. So just something to keep in mind. It might be able to smooth out the bumps in the wing, so that's another reason to perhaps use it. So I put like a semicircle half round on the front and a nice long slow taper on the back for each of these, which I think is how it's supposed to work. There we go. That was quite fun. I managed to get some of them like drum tight across these holes, but most of them are not. I'm still trying to get the knack of how to do that. See, these ones are a bit crinkly, but it's probably not going to matter. I made them different colours just in case it helped me with orientation while I'm flying, but to be honest, these colours are too similar to really tell the difference, I think. I'm just using an ordinary clothes iron for this, by the way. I tried to find one of those smaller hobbyist laminating irons, but they're too expensive, really. There was one on Trade Me for $75. A hobby shop in Hamilton wanted $95 for one, whereas you can get one of these brand new from Briscoe's for just under $50. and it's not actually too bad. Whoops. I was trying to focus like that, but it's still on. This point is actually reasonably pointy. I didn't need it for anything here, but I'm hoping that it's pointy enough to get into most of the little gaps that I'll need to. And it turned out to be very useful for like folding edges around like that, because it's a lot, you've got this huge big flat surface which you don't have with the hobby, the small hobby one. So for example here I could fold that around quite easily and just get it all in one go. So yeah, and I heard that the thermostats on these are better than on those hobby ones too, so that's another reason to try this. I've decided to laminate this wing now before going any further. I didn't really see much point in giving it a maiden flight in this fragile state just to have it break and then laminate it afterwards. That would be kind of silly. And I'm also quite pleased with how strong it becomes just to handle it while I'm trying to build it, and hopefully I won't have any more of this kind of problem with breaking it while I'm just picking it up and stuff. I kind of feel like I'm walking on eggshells every time I touch it, so I want to get past that. So that means I'm going to have to take these off. Well, I don't have to, but I'm going to. And it turns out they don't stick very well anyway. Some of these like food containers are quite impervious to glue. This is Gorilla Glue, but even epoxy, once the epoxy is hardened and you bend the plastic a little bit, it just sort of pops right off. So I might just do away with these altogether now that I'm going to have some stiff covering over this area. I have a couple of colours. I just wanted to get some bright colours, and the pink and the red I think was the only ones that they had available for immediate shipping at Hobby King when I bought them. And I'm thinking, as you can see, I've been doing a bit more practice with the larger area just before I get started. Make sure I don't screw it up on that one. I'm thinking I'll go with the red, because if I ever take this plane down to Tokoroa, I think red would cop me less flack from the wise guys down there than pink would. So red it's going to be. And the aileron here, you can see I've marked that out. I can't see it too well, but it's marked out there. But I'm thinking that's going to be a little bit too small. But unfortunately I have rather hurriedly already cut here and here. So I'm thinking I'll just trickle a little bit of Gorilla Glue in here to reattach it before I put the covering film on, and then I'll make this aileron go a little bit further out to maybe about there or something like that. Okay, there we go, all done. It could have gone better, I think. Somehow I've got little bits of bubbles in here, and it seems like if you take the iron and you just sort of spot press them, they go away. Like you can get rid of them, but only temporarily, and they seem to come back when you bend the wing a little bit. They just sort of reappear somehow. I'm not sure if that's just what you can expect from this kind of a method, but I think it's alright for now. It hasn't actually, when I twist it like that, it hasn't actually changed that sort of strengthening a whole lot, but it has made it a lot. If I try and bend the wing like that, it's completely different like that. And the main thing is that I'm not worried about sort of bumping onto this edge now, because it's quite strong and solid. So I've cut the ailerons out now. They are a little bit longer. They're 28 centimeters instead of I think 22 that they were before. And I'm just taped the servos in, and I'm figuring out how to do this, and I've come up with this idea, which is about the best I can do, I think. The wires are going to be just long enough to reach into the middle section here, so that I can put this arrangement in front of the FR4 plate, and it's going to be just low enough if I cut out a small recess in the foam so that it can fit underneath the boom, or on top of the boom I guess. And this is a sort of a Y junction, so these servos are just directly connected to each other, and all of the 3 pins are all connected. So I'm going to use this little pin header thingy, which is going to be soldered together to bring those out here like this. And from the top of the wing it's just going to look like that, and I'll probably just solder directly onto that from the receiver when it comes to it. So that's that all in place. I just put a bit of sellotape over that to hold it in, and likewise I cut a groove in here for the wires and put a piece of sellotape over that as well. It's nice and flat. By the way, when I put this covering on, I gained 15 grams, which was a little disappointing. I didn't think it would be quite that much. So this wing altogether now weighs 80 grams. And the next step is to glue in these control horns. Those are also made with my CNC machine, of course, and I think I'll put a tiny little drop of hot glue in there, and hopefully it's not going to mess up the foam too much. To connect the ailerons to the servos, I'm going to use this method here. This is just a piece of thin, I think it's 2mm carbon rod, connected to, in this case, a paper clip, but any piece of stiff thin wire would do, and it has a little bit of heat shrink wrapped around there, and then a drop of CA dropped inside the heat shrink. And this is the method that the bonsai uses. This is where I got the idea from, and it works quite well. It's light and very stiff, being carbon rod, and quite strong. I was skeptical at first of this joint here, how strong it would be. I thought it would sort of slip, but it's very, very strong, and it will break if you twist it like that. Like, this is just a test piece that I made up to check how it works, but now I can pull it. But yeah, if you're just pushing and pulling on it this way, it's very, very strong. And these paper clips, I found that they fit perfectly in the little holes on the servo control horns. It's about 1mm thick paper clip, so that is going to be just perfect. Here's how the rubber band mount for the elevator is going to work. Fits in there quite nicely. I found some rubber bands that are fairly small, and this one, when it's naturally, or when it's relaxed, is about here, which is quite good because it's going to reach to just here, and it's not too strong for the servo to be able to pull it down, and it pulls itself up to around about there, when, at least I'm hoping it will, when I put this little mount control horn thingy on there. And if you're wondering why there's a piece of balsa in here now, it's because these tail planes are actually new. I made them again from 1.6mm balsa instead of 3.2mm, just to try and save some weight. I only saved 3 grams overall for this whole tail section, so it may not have been worth it, and they're a bit more fragile, but with this covering on there they are strong enough, I think. And another nice side effect was that now that I know a little bit more about using this covering film, I managed to get all of these holes to be nice and flat instead of crinkly. It's quite easy because this balsa is perfectly flat to begin with. You can just tack down a little bit at the end, and because I have that large iron, I just blast straight across it in one go almost, and it all works out very nicely. The trick to getting these flat, I've found, is that you don't go too slowly across. You have to try and get the circumference of the circle tacked down before the film has finished shrinking. At least that seems to be working quite well for me. I managed to get these all nice and professional looking. Look at that. I'm quite pleased with that. Doesn't really matter that there's a bit of crinkle in there, but just makes me feel like a bit more of a pro if I've managed to get them all nice and flat. So this is the tail section complete now, with the control horn on the bottom, and it works quite well. There's a little bit of a clicky feeling though when it gets past this longest point of extension. It sort of clicks down. I'm just sort of exaggerating there, but it goes like that and then clicks down. I can feel it with my finger, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for the servo, and I can still control it to get it exactly where I want if I move it slowly. And the total weight is 15 grams, so not too bad, I think. I'm just wondering if it's going to be big enough. So I'm going to use hot glue to do this for now. I know this is not ideal because it adds quite a bit of weight and it's not really as secure as it should be. I think I made a bit of a mistake actually in my design. If I do this again, I'll make these vertical pieces come up a little bit higher so that I can put a pin through here which will stop it rotating and also stop it sliding front to back. Alright, I have the pitch cable connected now, so that is the last step that is necessary before we can go flying. I've got to say I'm not very impressed with this receiver. If you just don't touch anything on the controls for a while and you just sit there and look at it for about 15-20 seconds or so, it'll do a twitch. Both the ailerons and the pitch will just do this big twitch. So there it is, right there. Do you see that? I didn't touch anything here and it just did this big twitch. It's almost like the receiver is resetting itself, because when I turn the radio off and on again, it does quite a few twitches there when it regains the signal. So I'm not sure if that's related to this. Maybe it's actually losing the signal a little bit or something. I don't know, but anyway, that twitch is not very encouraging, but we'll see how it goes. CG is right there. I think that'll be okay. And the all-up weight is 167 grams, not quite the 150 I was hoping for. Well, we have a very, very nice day today. I've been waiting for about 2 weeks for this. Almost no wind and nice and sunny.
I don't think I mentioned this before, but there's a bit of a droop in that right hand wing. May be able to see it if we look straight down the wing there. It's not straight, and it's the opposite to dihedral, so it's a bit of anhedral, I think it's called, maybe. But it's not much, so I don't think it's going to be a problem. If it is, maybe I can sort of heat the wing up and sort of warp it upwards a bit there, maybe. I don't know, but let's just give it a try and see what happens as is. Incidentally, it turns out that that tree in my corner there was a sakura. I didn't even know that. Chotto natsukashii ne. Right, also in case I didn't mention, I'm using a normal 50-30 prop and a 2-cell 300 milliamp hour battery. It's a bit weak, but oh, it's vibrating too. Ooh, I don't like these like rubber band things where the prop holds on like that. These prop savers really suck. Anyway, let's give it a throw. Wind's coming from that way, I think. Oh yeah, we're flying. This is half throttle. A little over half throttle. Whoa. Their roll authority is not that great actually. Pitch authority is pretty good. Needs quite a bit of it needs to go faster maybe? It's not very easy to control, to be honest. Why is it going down? I can't gain altitude for some reason here. Oh, the wind's coming from that way. Let's try this. That's better. This is full throttle, and it sinks down a lot. Why does it sink down so... Whoa! I'm just going to try and come back now. It's full throttle, and it's hardly moving. What's wrong with you? It's just bloody difficult to control for some reason. I wouldn't have thought... Man, it's really shaking. See how the prop goes off center? Why can't these things just be a 5mm in the diameter on the end of that barrel there? It's like 5.1mm or something that you can't quite get it to sit straight. Alright, well, didn't break anything. Let's give it another try. I'm surprised that it took that much throttle just to go anywhere, really. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Oh, look at that. Why can't it go up? I don't get this. It's full throttle. And I had pitched full back like that, and it's just sort of going nowhere. Maybe I should try a 6-inch prop, just in case this prop is... It's just the prop is too small, maybe. Look at that, like... I hate these things, man. Why did I put this stupid motor on? See, this is full throttle, and it's just sinking. Full throttle! What the f... Alright, I've changed the prop for a 50-45. And this one seems like the inside of the hole there is a little bit larger because it does actually sit down straight on there, and it's a fair bit smoother. So let's try that. Still doesn't feel like it's pushing much air though. It feels like the prop is on backwards or something. Maybe this motor is just so weak it doesn't... I don't know. Anyway, let's give it a try. That's a bit better, although full throttle again. Okay. Alright, so it's actually got a bit of... I'm at 3/4 throttle here and it's climbing. That's much better. Wow, it's just that prop, huh? Strange. Okay, that's a decent climb. Yeah, it's about 3/4 throttle. And I'll turn the motor off here and see how she glides. Propper's still spinning a little. Yeah, propper's spinning quite a bit. Now it's stopped. Doesn't glide that great. Oh, it's not terrible. Not quite the performance I was hoping for. In fact, I don't think it's any better than the Eagle that I made recently. I was really hoping that this would be better than the Eagle. That's kind of why I made it. But it's about the same. Okay, motor off here. Oh, yeah, it's floating okay. Oh, that's good, yeah. All of a sudden, it just suddenly dives down. Like... Oh, it's better than the Eagle, but not by much. There's hardly any wind. So, it's not doing too bad, really. It's sort of hanging up there okay. Hey, whoa, I didn't turn that way. Yeah, the roll, I wonder if it's that twitching that I was showing you before that does that. Every now and then it just sort of goes berserk. In roll, mostly. It just feels really weak overall. I might put a 6-inch prop on and see what happens, eh? Okay, I have a 60/40 prop on here now, and I also noticed that there's a little grub screw loose in the barrel where the motor holds onto its base, which probably was not helping much either. Let's see what this turns out like. It already sounds much better. This is half throttle. Yeah, oh, 60%. Oh, that's way better. So it's up there already. And I'm just going to turn off the motor here. Propper's still spinning quite a lot. It's gliding alright though. I'm fully back on the pitch stick at some points, and other points I'm almost just letting it go and letting it return to center. So it's a bit of a strange one. Is that how gliders generally are? Oh shit, lost orientation. Back on the power now. Oh, this is way better. Let's see if I can do a flyby glide from here. Oh, it's going to be too high, but I'll come over the top of me anyway. That's not bad. Oh, this is way better with this prop. Still seems not very stable though. It's actually a little bit easy to lose orientation too. I think the Eagle, because it has those dihedral, or what do you call it, polyhedral, wingtips are swept up, glide from here. The eagle is much easier to keep your orientation with. Still gliding here. And motor back on there. It's not bad, is it? Well, sometimes it seems to just climb like crazy. This is about half throttle. 60% throttle. Alright, power off here. It gets up there reasonably quick. It seems to be hard to keep it steady, just like motionless in a solid, steady glide. Oh shit. Yeah, I'm losing my orientation quite often with this. I wonder if I can get any lift of any kind from those trees over there. There's probably not enough wind for that, but let's see what happens. Motor off. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Oh, is it holding altitude there? I feel like it might be. I don't feel like it's coming down much there. If we just had a little bit more wind, would be nice. Yeah, it's slowly coming down, but I'm quite pleased with that. Alright, power back on. Just take it up really high. See if there's any difference in feeling, like, you know, maybe some thermals or something that are not present at the lower level. Okay, power off. I think I'm going to get a sore neck. Well, I can't really tell what's going on up there, but it's staying up there for ages so far. Must be a couple of minutes, and it hasn't looked like it's really come down much. So maybe there is a thermal or something there, I don't know. That's good. It's just sitting there. Oh, now it's coming down. Oh crap. Was I just lucky before and it was just sitting in a good spot? Or is it just that when it gets closer, you're able to see your perspective or the distance better? Anyway, just before I cut the power off at the top of this glide, I heard the battery alarm go off, so I think I'm going to have to finish this flight here. Hopefully with a nice catch. Can we do that? Yeah. Well, that was pretty decent length of time gliding. So, yeah, I think it needs more wing area and a proper motor that's not a shitty one like that. Otherwise, it's not too bad. So, I'll fly it a bit more, and sometime in the future I think I'll make a slightly larger wingspan, like as in more chord-wise and also wingspan wise larger as well, using pretty much the same techniques I think, and we'll see how it goes. But for now, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.